Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Fires upfield into the end zone, and it's caught! Jelani Woods! Touchdown! INDY!
A 43-point night for Tyrese Halliburton.
How do you like that, partner?
Galloway drives all the way to the hole, throws it up.
Got it!
Indiana's got their first lead of this contest.
I mean, that's a goddamn Emmy winner right there.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard to another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday, November 28th. Coming to you from high atop the 18th fairway at the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Hope you're having a great start to your day. And if not, hope we can get it headed in that way. Mike DeCourcy will be joining us today. Chronic Hoosier, Mike Niziolek from the Bloomington Herald-Times. Great lineup as always. Hope everyone's got a good day going right now. Any questions or comments, throw them on. I know everyone, I keep seeing this John Gruden thing. John Gruden is not a candidate for the head coaching job at Indiana. And if you want any reasons, just go back and read his emails that he sent out. I know that he has ties to Bloomington, but I just don't see that having any impact. He would have to do one hell of a job convincing someone that I don't know, he didn't send those emails or something. I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't see that happening. And before I forget, I want to Nathan Finney, a businessman, a well-known man of the Bloomington community, of course, passed away a few days ago, I believe in a plane crash. Our thoughts and comments are with his wife and his children, his family. Nathan was a great guy, just a super, super great guy, an IU Kelly grad. And it's a shock to everyone. I failed to mention that yesterday. But thoughts and prayers with him and his family. So wanted to make sure I said that. Hello to everyone on the Andy Moore Honda hotline. Fred, of course. People listening in from all over. Shout out to our peeps on radio. 97.7 ESPN, the ref, always the right call down in Evansville. 12:30 a.m., 104.7 FM, the voice of the region, WJOB, up in the region. And then, of course, Fort Wayne's only sports station, 1380 The Fan. Make sure you keep it tuned right there, and you can catch Caleb and Kenny each morning. And the Sports Rush right after Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Hope everyone is doing well. Sean says, new coach brings a sexy, exciting offense. I'm sure this is what he hopes. And is always competitive, or Iowa-type offense that is boring as hell but wins. Well, that's because it's the defense. What brings fans to Memorial Stadium quicker? It's a question. Winning. Winning will bring people. That Iowa type, I don't know if that would bring them quicker. Winning ugly, or winning ugly might, because winning is all that matters when it comes down to it. But it's a great question. But just winning will bring people to Memorial Stadium. You've got to be during the Mallory era, they were at least competitive with Ohio State and Michigan in those teams. Didn't always beat them, but they did beat them. They just have to be competitive. And it's not just about bringing fans. It's about being competitive. But more importantly, college athletics is going in a direction that I don't think that teams that are comfortable in a conference just because they're in a conference, I think those days are about to pass. Indiana is a founding member of the Big Ten, but at the end of the day, 5 years from now, I don't think that matters because it continues to move towards being a money generating vehicle, and that's what matters. I think that at some point these mega powers are going to pull away from the NCAA because the NCAA is continuing to prove itself unworthy of getting much accomplished. But Indiana has to take itself seriously when it comes to football. They have been coasting for decades. Coasting. Because they're in the Big Ten Conference. And those days are over. Someone sent me a message last night asking why did that Indiana is currently hired a search firm. And I'd said long before, Indiana should not be allowed to be in charge of hiring this football coach. Number one. Number two, they should not be allowed to be in charge of writing the contract for this coach because they're not good at either. So, but they asked me, why would they hire a search firm? And I said, because they're not worth a crap at hiring. Number one, they're just not. Number two, this is a job-defining hire for Scott Dolson. He's hired Mike Woodson. I'm not sure that the basketball program makes the tournament this year in year 3. They're looking a little wonky. I mean, not that they don't have the talent and can pull it together. They can. But the football program is just in the dumpster. Gritty asking the why is Dolson the AD? Well, Scott's a great guy, but I still think Pat Kraft was probably the right call there when they had that opportunity. They did not. Pat Kraft, now the athletics director at a little school called Penn State. He's a former IU football player, IU grad. There's a reason Penn State has him. So think about it. Scott, much more basketball oriented, was manager on the basketball team. Was Fred Glass's right-hand man. Sean says, from looking at Twitter, the Indiana fan base is not 100% thrilled with any one candidate. We all want success, but our definition of success is so skewed from years of mediocrity. Good point. I don't think you're going to there's no way you're going to make the Indiana fan base happy with any hire. I really believe that. There's going to be a section of them that wanted somebody else. It doesn't matter. Robert agrees in the near future, college football is going to realign probably in ways that we can't even imagine just yet. When it does, all college athletics are going to be shaken up. And that is true. It won't matter that Indiana has a good basketball program. But to say that you have a good basketball program is to say you better have one that's winning and winning at a high level. Indiana's not there yet. I did not say Dolson was on the hot seat, and I did not say Woody is a shaky hire. 5 left. What I said was, I don't think that in year 3, this team's looking a little shaky. They don't look like a solid NCAA team to me at the moment. And part of that has been the inability to recruit guards. I was thinking last night, has Woody landed a guard since he's been here? I mean, Gabe Cupps was recruited by Lil Rhodey. That's how that started. Xavier was already here. Trey Galloway was recruited by Lil Rhodey. He has not brought in a single guard. And Indiana that's where their problems lie right now. Well, Mackenzie Mbako needs to get off the schneid. Maybe he did in his last game. He had a good game. Still 1 of 6 from the 3-point line, or 1 of 7, whatever he was. Justin says Indiana is a basketball school. That comes first and trumps a lot. But see, that's the problem. That is not going to work in this new era of athletics. Football is the engine that drives the train. Period. End of story. And it doesn't matter what kind of school you are. If you don't have a good football program, no one's going to care unless – look at Kansas. Kansas even has guess who was the second worst football program? Kansas. But they've become exciting to watch. They're fun to watch. Lance Leopold doing a good job there. Their football team was fun, exciting, scoring points. And the basketball program doing very, very well. They'll be a part of something going forward. You can no longer just be something in name. Yes, he had a lottery pick last year. Boom, and he's gone. He's not here. You have to have sustained play, and that is not. Wow, Lil Rhodey is 5-2 this year. That's a good start. Sean says, as he ages, his love for IU football is growing. He's also a Cubs fan, and before the World Series win, the two felt very comparable. It feels like an immovable force is preventing winning. Lovable losers. RC on the dais. Yep.
It's time to break whenever you're ready, Jim.
We'll do that now. When we come back, Mike DeCourcy joins us. and we'll continue this conversation. You're listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thanks a lot for being with us. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Awesome.
A bookshelf with no books.
Yeah, we're painting in here, so
I was like, oh man, I know there used to be stuff on there.
Yeah, we're doing some painting, so I had to clear all the books out of there.
I believe he was flying his own plane and had a crash. I was actually talking about your favorite sport, football.
Oh, of course.
Indiana football more specifically, and the need to become a competitive program, or I think it's going to be problematic as college sports continues to evolve.
Well, I think you have to keep that possibility as a concern. I'm still not sure it goes the direction that so many people think it'll go, but it's possible, I guess.
This is a perfect segue as we go live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network with us now. And I was telling Mike in the break that it started off just talking about with that college athletics changing the way it has and football becoming a runaway train or one runaway leader of the train that Indiana has to stop pretending to care about football and actually show that they truly, truly do, that it has become so much so that even Kansas, who was probably the second worst football program and behind only Indiana or in front of only Indiana, but look at them now. They have an exciting brand of football to watch, scoring points, and anybody else. But you just have to have a competitive program there because it is changing. This engine is just becoming stronger. And I don't understand it because college basketball is a huge draw for all winter long up through the NCAA tournament, but football is the juggernaut that has become this the leader in some form or fashion. But in Indiana has continued to just stay where they are as a rock bottom program, and normally you at least see some circulature where, okay, you've got good and you stay up there. And Indiana had 2 decent seasons, but 2 decent seasons out of 7, not really cutting it. But they've never really put the effort to make them better than they are. I mean, people talk about, they filled the ends of the stadium in. Well, that's great, but that doesn't do a lot for the program itself. And you've got some thoughts on whether or not how much it'll affect, but I think that it's going, and this could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, but I could see a day where Indiana gets kicked aside if they continued down this same road. Well,
I think, these are 2 separate conversations, and one of them you are much more you have much greater ability to discuss, because I don't know what Indiana has or hasn't done in football. I know that they had a nice team a few years ago with Michael Penix, and Michael left after he got hurt, and the injury, I think, changed the trajectory of Indiana football in ways that that led from Tom Allen being a well-paid coach to from that being his reality to being someone who's going to collect a nice buyout being his reality. I mean, that's I think if Michael doesn't get hurt that year, it changes everything. But it did, and I think that had an impact on what his ultimate decision was in terms of forwarding his career, and it led IU to the position that it is now. So I don't really know what they have done, but like 10 years ago, everybody said that there would be 4 super conferences, and they would all have a dozen teams in it, and like symmetry like that doesn't work. That's not how college sports have ever worked. And honestly, in order to achieve that level of symmetry, whatever conferences exist would have to expose themselves to significant liability, and it's not worth it. If you're going to get the power scheming in some room, saying, okay, you're going to have the West, and you're going to have the South, and we're going to have the Midwest, and you're going to have the East or whatever, and that's how it's going to be carved up. Like, the people that get cut out of that are going to sue, and I just don't see that as being reality. Will football someday be operated differently than it is now? Yeah, I think it might. But one of the interesting things was that not this past summer, but the summer before, I did a piece about who people wanted. Not what person, but what sort of person people in college athletics wanted to be the next NCAA president before Charlie Baker was hired, and well before he was. And I talked to a lot of different people in college athletics to get an idea of what they were looking for. And in those conversations, the idea of FBS football becoming a separate entity came up so much. And it was presented to me like we're rounding third and heading for home. And what I've always said is that the NCAA has a lot of different properties or qualities, I guess I should say, that make it valuable. And one of those is the idea of a liability shield. And that's always stopped them. Now, there's a case in court now about NIL money for those who didn't receive it before it became acceptable. I still don't understand how you go back and change the rules after the fact. I don't get that at all. I don't understand it. I was taught about ex post facto law when I was in high school, so I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand how you go back and change the rules now, but there's a significant liability factor in that. And if that wipes out the NCAA's treasury or whatever, if they lose that and they get hit hard by that, then at some point the liability shield concept no longer holds. But that's part of what's keeping football in the fold now. The idea that it's a really expensive sport to run, and it's a really expensive sport to insure. And there's that concept of, we still have that idea of, are they employees or are they not? There's so many things that have to be resolved in that regard. That's the first component. And the second component of is this. Okay, Ohio State and Michigan played on Saturday. Fabulous game. Both teams came in at 11-0. That's what Michigan and Ohio State are used to. That's what their fans want. Well, how do you get to 11-0? Well, you have to have somebody to beat. So, do you think that the Ohio State and Alabama fans want to be in a league with Ohio State? Do you think Ohio State wants to be in with Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan and Oklahoma and Texas and only those teams, so that they can all basically be the NFL and be 6-6? I don't think that's what college football fans at the biggest programs want. I think they want to be able to play teams that they are expected to beat. And they don't always beat them. I mean, we saw Ohio State lose to Purdue a few years ago. We saw them lose to Iowa a few years ago on the road. That it happens on occasion, but that's what college football fans are conditioned to feel. They want to go in on Saturday, have a good time before the game. They want to enjoy the game, and then they want to have a good time after the game. And it's not like that in the NFL. You go have a good time before the game, and then you're hanging by your fingernails for 3 hours. And then when it's over, maybe you're happy and maybe you're not. It's a totally different product and a totally different experience. And I just don't buy that college football fans are lining up to have that different experience. They have it on Sunday if they're NFL fans too. But right now, the fans of the biggest programs, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, SC when they're good. And that's, they want to be those kinds of powers.
Yeah, I've never understood, first of all, how college football got to be so powerful, playing one time a week when college basketball plays 7 days a week. Every day of the night, you could watch a college basketball game, and I generally am. So that is a sport that just controls every day almost, it seems, when it's going, and it has the greatest sporting event there is to me, the NCAA tournament, which is the greatest 3 weeks of the year, but yet football is considered this leader, which I don't get. They play once a week, and I don't. First of all, how is football considered so much bigger than college basketball? Because I don't get it.
Well, that all comes down to audience. The audience for college football, in terms of a specific event, is much larger than it is in college basketball. And there are many more telecasts of college basketball than there are of college football, probably by a factor of 3, maybe by a factor of 5, because you not only have more games per week, but you also have more teams that are saleable, so to speak. In college football, you've got a smaller package of teams. There's 130 Division I teams. There are 360 in men's basketball. And of the 130, there are maybe, I don't know, let's say 75 or 80 that are saleable in college basketball. That goes up to maybe 100 or a little more than 100. You add in some more conferences that are watchable, that people want to watch. And then they play more times a game. So there are many more telecasts, but they very rarely draw an audience. Now, this is regular season we're talking. That is enviable. They draw nice, reliable, steady audiences, and they are good for the networks that telecast them, but it's not what you get on a football Saturday. You don't get the 9 million people. I think that Fox is probably going to end up having 15 to 17 million people watched Ohio State, Michigan. That doesn't come in basketball except in the NCAA tournament. That you'll never get a regular season basketball game to draw that again. When Duke and Kentucky,
but don't you have when you add them up because they have so many?
Well, that's a factor, and that makes it valuable. It just doesn't make it as valuable. I saw somebody say on Twitter that probably 30% of the value in a conference contract is in men's basketball, and the other 70 would be in football. That seems to be about right. But because that 70 is where it is, I mean, 70% is a big chunk. If you're a 2-income household and one person in the household earns 70% of the money and then gets an opportunity to go, let's say you're living in Indy and you get an offer to make even more, go to LA or whatever, I don't know, just using it as an example, you're going to go for the 70% person because the other person's only bringing in 30. So that's kind of how football versus men's basketball works.
Indiana, I said that they have not made the effort in football. And Mike says, define effort. Well, going out and trying to hire the absolute best coach that you can bring in. They did that for basketball. They went and got who they thought was the best coach. That did not happen for football. They went down the hallway when they had a change last time and paid the lowest salary that was being paid in Division I football. So that to me is not making an effort in that sport. And that's what I mean. If you were truly making an effort, you would do whatever it takes to try to bring in the best coach. And while I'm not saying you have to pay him $9 million a year and do something stupid like Michigan State did, but you've got to be in the range of what good coaches are making then, not at the start. And they got there with Tom Allen eventually, but he was still one of the lowest paid coaches. But that's what I mean by, boy, that's like they've done as little as possible to take little baby steps until they're forced to take another step.
I think one of the challenges there, Jim, though, is because of Indiana's tradition in football.
It's thereof.
That's a way to put it. It's a challenge to get the best coach, because if you're Ohio State and you're in a position when Ohio State had their opening after Tressel, Penn State had an opening around the same time. I mean, even Penn State couldn't get Urban Meyer because Ohio State was there. So there's a pecking order. Like Penn State's got, they have 2 national championships in my lifetime. They have 5 undefeated teams in my lifetime. Some of which did not, excuse me, actually 6, I think. No, 5. Some of which did not get accorded a national champion, but they had 5 undefeated teams, and even they couldn't get Urban Meyer because Ohio State was there. So you have to be inventive when you're hiring a coach for a program like Indiana. You have to find a guy that's really good, really smart. You have to take a risk. You can't just say, well, this guy, this person has been like Cincinnati in hiring Satterfield this last hiring season. I mean, it was the lowest risk hire you could do. He had been a competent Division I high major coach. But had he dazzled anybody? No, they were like building a nice car for him to drive wherever he wanted to go in Louisville. They were very eager to get him to leave so that they could hire Braun. And I'm talking about the fan base. I'm not talking about the institution. I'm talking about the fan base, because I used to do radio down there regularly and heard all the time how much they would love to see him move on. And so. Yep. So that's one way of doing it, but it's, what did Cincinnati get for that? They got a poor season, and what makes you inspired for the future? His past of being okay, pretty good. So you have to in Indiana's position, you have to be inventive and see the future. And the problem that you have is, this is what Purdue did when they hired Braun. They saw it and they hired it, and it worked. And then you lose it. In his case, because he wanted to go home, he kind of took a lateral move, or maybe even and this is no reflection on Indiana. It's just a reflection on the economics of the 2 conferences. You could say it's a half step down because of the Big Ten's television contract and the ACC's.
But an easier path to college football playoffs.
Say that again?
But it was an easier path to the college football playoffs because he was leaving the Big Ten conference, going to the ACC, which is not nearly as strong.
But that ease couldn't even keep the Pac-12 together. They just said, who cares? We want to be in a league that's making the big money. I mean, everybody in the Pac-12 had an easier path to the conference championship when there was one more automatic bid than there will be. It was theirs. And they still said, nah. So I think it more came down to the going home kind of thing, and that's why he did it. But the thing that Indiana has to offer now is that idea of, we're solid, we're good for like the decade. It's not going to happen in 5 years. Nobody's walking away from that money in 5 years, and so relax about that. I think that the conferences. as they're structured now, will last well into the next decade. But there's no way it's ending before this current television contract expires.
We've got a lot more coming up. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network with us. We'll be back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
I'm out of coffee and coffee creamer. Daggone it, I forgot to stop last night.
Oh, wow.
I realized that as soon as this morning hit. I was like, doggone it. Man, the Big Ten basketball is looking kind of similar than it to football, with you've got a Purdue at the top and maybe Michigan State, and then after that, it's really there's a real drop off.
It's time for us to go live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday. It's November 28th. Appreciate you being with us. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network along with us as easy as each and every Tuesday, gratefully. Mike, I was in the break, I just mentioned that on the basketball side, the Big Ten is kind of reminding me of football as the old days, the Big Two and the little eight, which those numbers don't work right now, but of course, but with Purdue and Michigan State kind of at the top, there's a drop-off after that, just kind of like there was in football this year, and which normally you've got Illinois, which is probably a strong team, but I don't know who's really strong after that. And we haven't really seen it.
I don't know if you saw Ohio State play last week. I was really impressed with them. I thought they were very, very strong team, a lot of depth, a lot of ability to make plays. I like their point guard. They have multiple centers now. Key is back. Evan Mahaffey is a transfer, one of those guys that can help you in so many different ways. I was really impressed with their play a week ago. I'm still not, I still think Northwestern's going to be hard to play against. One of the troubles they've had in their non-conference is that they played a couple of teams that were smaller, and that makes Wilkinson hard to play. And then when he's not in there, they're a little easier to play against. Big Ten basketball, most of the teams have a good big guy, so he's able to be a factor. So I think they still are competitive. Wisconsin has had some bad moments, but some good moments too. So I still think there's some ability there. Maryland's been a puzzle to me. I don't get it. I don't understand why they have so much trouble scoring at this point, but maybe they're starting to find it out a little bit. They played a little better the last week or so. So I don't think that, I've always thought that Purdue's going to win the league. I've never had any doubt about that, and I still don't. But I think it's still going to be a solid league. Last year, a year ago, I was convinced that it was about 5 teams, and then it was a big drop. And we were all wrong about that. I was among many who said that, and I was definitely wrong. And so this year I kind of talked myself into the idea that it could be the customary 7 to 9. And I'm not sure that it's quite that they've played to that over the course of the first 3 weeks. I don't know that they've played to that level, but they did pretty well in the MTE slate, the Thanksgiving MTEs. They did reasonably well. Won a couple of them, played pretty well. So I still think that there might be more juice in this league than originally thought.
Well, it is early, and we know the teams are still finding their sea legs, as I've been saying a lot of lately, especially now in college basketball. You've got so much change with so many new faces. So every year is a new team. And Indiana is in that situation as well with some new faces, whether it's Mackenzie Mbako or Khalil Ware. But man, they're playing really good underneath. Those Khalil Ware and Malik Renew have really seemed to have formed, I don't want to call it a bond, but man, they are playing well together on the floor.
They are. I have been just so delighted by Khalil Ware's development, his blossoming. He is really fun to watch. Honestly, I mean, it's too early to say this, but I mean, he's playing like one of the best players in the country. Now, where that leads, some of those games have been against not great teams. Some of them have been against very good teams. Harvard for an Ivy League team was pretty impressive. They're one that they'll challenge Princeton, I think, in the league, and Yale for the title. I think it'll be a pretty good three-way competition there to see who wins the Ivy. So not all the competition has been what you'll get night in, night out in the Big Ten, but he's been great at both ends. He's been versatile. He's been a connector. He's not just, you don't throw it into him and never see the ball again. The ball comes back out if that's what's the right play. He's been extraordinarily impressive. I'm not surprised at Renew's development. I thought all along that he showed enough last year that given the opportunity to play regularly, he was going to be fine. So I think that what you're seeing there is really promising. Mackenzie Mbako against Harvard finally started to drop some shots. Remember, I told you, I think it was a week ago, how hard that transition is for the small forward position. The guy who is a pure small forward, who is a NBA size small forward, not the third guard that just happens to play there, but the real true small forward is used to being able to overwhelm opponents with some size. And you don't do that at the college level very often. So it takes a little time to adjust. And he's actually getting it pretty quickly. He was really good on Sunday. I was very impressed. So that's a great step forward. The one thing that they have to have happen is guys have to start dropping shots from the perimeter, and some of that comes from the struggle to make shots comes from them not hitting the shots that they get, but some of that also comes from not doing a good enough job at developing those shots. We saw it a year ago with Miller Kopp. And we're seeing it now with Trey Galloway. They're just not getting enough action run to that shot. Everything runs to the inside, and that's a good thing that you can do that, but it shouldn't be the only it's not the only thing, but it shouldn't be so overweighted to that, because eventually somebody's going to beat you just by making threes while you're making twos. They're going to shoot a good number.
I thought that was going to happen the other night against Harvard. I was like, man, they're trading threes for twos, and that's not going to work out well.
Yeah, exactly. And Harvard hung in the game with their early three-point shooting. And it is there are some. I think Ken Pomeroy might be the one that I read who doesn't believe that there, in a sense, is such a thing as three-point defense, that guys either make the shots or miss them on your watch. And I'm not sure that I totally agree with that. I believe that you can make an impact on how you close out, on who you don't leave, that sort of thing. I think you can. But in general, I think that there will be games where if you don't have that ability to make shots and to generate three-point shots, good looks, that you'll lose a game or two like that because of because the other team is going to have a night. They're going to have a hot night. And even if you do a good job, you're going to wind up losing the game.
Well, and to follow up on that, I don't know if this goes to your point. In the first half, the other night against Harvard, Indiana, they were 8 of 17 behind the arc, which is, boy, you'll take that all day and twice on Sunday. Second half, they were 1 of 9. I don't know if that was Indiana ramping up the defense or they just missed the shots. But that's a stark difference.
Oh, I'm going to say that I think that they made defensive adjustments, and I was pretty tired when I was watching the game, so I wasn't breaking it down. But I'm going to say that they made adjustments, who they leave, who they don't leave, where they don't leave players. Those sorts of things make a difference in whether or not a team continues to shoot well. Also, having to guard you and deal with that physicality, that and the size, it wears on you physically and mentally. Having to deal with Mbako on the wing or Renew driving, bouncing it into the post. That's hard on you, and you get tired. So it's harder in the second half to go that 8 of 17, and you're going to trend more toward that 1 of 9. That's a factor as well. So I think Indiana is going to be a very capable defensive team. They've got great defense at the point as long as X is playing. They've got the length at the rim with Ware blocking shots. I think they're going to be a significant defensive team all the way through. And we know that they're going to be able to score in the post. But they need that perimeter threat to be more than just that. You've got one of the interesting things, I can't remember who it was, and I apologize to whoever I read on Twitter yesterday that pointed this out, was that all of their shooters aren't making shots, and all of the guys who are low attempts are making shots. Ware hasn't taken a lot, but he's making them. X is not taking a lot, but he's making them. So they need guys like Galloway, who I think at this point is 3 of 18. They need that closer to 7 of 18, 6 of 18, 7 of 18. I think would be the number that would be the baseline acceptable range, and then anything better than that would be really terrific.
Well, it's like the other day I pointed out the at the end of the day the Harvard score. If Indiana just made two 3-pointers, we're looking at a 20-point game, and you look at that and you're like, oh wow, that's a 20-point game. That's what it should be. It just makes a perceptive difference simply by 2 shots is all it would have taken to do that. And we probably are not having the depth of this conversation like we are, and that's the difference. They're just under what they need to be as far as hitting those types of shots.
Yeah, I think that honestly, that victory is going to have some value later on. It may not have huge value in March, but I think it'll end up being at minimum a quad 2. I think Harvard's going to play its way into a position where that'll be a quad 2 type win. So I think it was, and they'll have the added value of having won fairly decisively. I thought it was a good performance and a better performance than, say, the Louisville game. Even though Louisville's got a better brand name and they're playing in a tougher league, they played much better against Harvard. Obviously, the second half being the best half, but much better against Harvard than they did against Louisville up in New York. So I think they're showing some progress. That perimeter shooting piece is still an issue, but people were asking me about when do you panic or whatever. And I never thought that they need to panic, because I'm not expecting them to win a national championship. And the things that I wanted to see early on, I'm seeing. I'm seeing renewed blossom as I thought he would, but it has to happen. And then I'm seeing Ware play at a level that I never even considered. I never thought it was possible. I just wanted him to be useful in terms of how he performed, and he's been close to dominant.
And we don't know yet, but they have to make the NCAA tournament this year. That would be kind of a real step backwards if they didn't. And I don't know where they are yet until we get into Big Ten play, or they actually have a gauntlet coming up with Kansas and Auburn and 2 Big Ten games snuck in there between them. So they have a really tough stretch of their schedule. They're in the midst of a tough stretch, maybe the toughest all season.
Yeah, I mean, that Kansas game is a really brutal game. Kansas is veteran, talented. They only go 4 deep. I said 3 a week ago and felt really bad that I forgot KJ Adams, who's one of my favorite college players. They have 4 terrific players in there, and they're searching for the 5th. And they got a little bit of good play out of Furphy, the Australian 6'8", 6'9" kid who can shoot the ball. He had some good moments in Maui, in the Maui Invitational in Honolulu. He had some good moments, but they're still searching for that 5th guy. And the absence of that 5th guy is a big reason why they did not win the tournament out there. But they're still a really, those 4 that they have are elite Division I college basketball players. And so that's a tough game when you're still developing. And then they have to play on the road at Michigan as well. Maryland is an interesting game, man. Because Maryland they started out the year really struggling to make any baskets. We talk about Indiana not making as many threes as you'd like. They could have left Maryland alone in the gym for their first 2-3 games, and they wouldn't made anything. They were struggling to that degree, but now it's coming around. They're starting to play really much better basketball, the kind of basketball that I anticipated Maryland playing from the beginning. They're starting to play now, and so it's that's a good sign for them. They put 92 on UMBC. They put 68 on South Alabama. The ball's starting to go into the basket, and so that's going to be a real challenge for the Hoosiers. I guess that's this Friday.
And Indiana put up 89 points without shooting the 3 ball very well, which is a good sign. But so if they could get just a little mixture in there, they'll be a dangerous team. But I remember from a few years ago when the Nebraska team came in, you have to take every team seriously every night, because you talk about Maryland starting to pick up steam. Man, a game like that they could pick off, that would just put them on a rocket ship as far as being confident and carrying forward. So you have to be ready for that.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things that I've said about, people, why isn't the Big Ten any good in March the last 3 years? Why did they struggle to the degree that they did? And I still believe that a component of that is playing in a conference as deep as it has been in those years. Now, we don't know whether it's going to be as deep this year. The trend so far has been okay. They've had some moments and they've had some not as great moments. They haven't been poor. They haven't been as strong as, say, they were in 2020 or 2021 or even 2022. They haven't been as strong at that level, but they've as I mentioned, Wisconsin had its moments in their tournament. Ohio State, Purdue, those are all successes in the MTEs. They did okay in the Gavitt games. It didn't dominate, didn't get dominated. They don't have the stage of the ACC Challenge this year that they did in past years. And I think, honestly, this would have been a good year to play the ACC. ACC has not been impressive to date. They've struggled at a really high level, a lot of their teams. So this would have been a good year to have that continue, and unfortunately, it's no more. So we'll see where it goes from here. But I do think that every team in this league has some threat to it. I mean, we haven't talked about Nebraska. Nebraska's 7-0. They haven't played anybody significant yet, but they've got guys. I mean, they played as well in February, March of last year as almost anybody in the league. I mean, obviously, exception of the high-end teams, but they were right. If they had been healthy last year, I think they would have been a threat, and they are healthy now. So I think that's a really dangerous team that no one's really looking at right now, because they have their schedule doesn't heat up until they start playing Big Ten games, and they have Creighton as well.
Confidence breeds confidence. Mike, what's up next for you? What do you have going at the Sporting News?
Working on some football stuff for Georgia. I'm working on a piece about Georgia for this week. I'm working on a piece a little bit about the Big Ten and college basketball generally, and what it'll be like in terms of scheduling in the future, the near future, not the future you're imagining, but the near future, the one where we still have these 4 conferences and others. So writing about that as well. And so a little bit more football oriented this week than usual, but and then of course I will be at I'll make my annual trip to it's a long trip now, all the way from Fishers, Indiana to downtown Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. I've been at most of those, not everyone, but most of those. And I always enjoy going to that, because I see a lot of cool people from the Big Ten. And when I say that, I don't mean people that work for the Big Ten, but also the really cool people that cover Big Ten teams as well. So looking forward to that on Saturday night.
Absolutely. Make sure you give him a follow, Mike DeCourcy with the Sporting News and Big Ten Network. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it as always. We've got more coming up. Chronic Hoosier joins us. Mike Niziolek as well from the Bloomington Herald-Times. Plenty to get talking about. Back with it right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Holy moly.
All right, Jim. We go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday. Glad to be with you, coming to you from high atop the 18th fairway at the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. And just finished up with Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, Big Ten Network, Chronic Hoosier up next, and Mike Niziolek from the Bloomington Herald-Times. Plenty to talk about, whether it's basketball or football or whatever you'd like. But couple of things. How far can IU basketball go with the guard situation they have? I know everybody is in love with Trey Galloway and Gabe Cupps, but Gabe is a freshman, and I think you're seeing his freshmanness come out. He's still learning, and not that he's not a good player, he is. But this is a transition, man. And so he'll continue to learn as the season goes on. That's what you saw in Purdue last year. Purdue had 2 freshman guards, and it came into play as they continue to learn on their end. But, man, Purdue could go undefeated in the Big Ten this year. That is not far-fetched. And that would be something, but you've also got besides Indiana looking for a football coach, the tracker, the transfer portal is also something to keep track of. But who are some of the coaches that you would like to see, or there's a lot of names being batted around by a lot of people? One that kind of keeps popping up, the first one that comes naturally to me is Justin Fry, and he's the current offensive line coach and associate head coach at Ohio State, but he is an Indiana native. He played at Indiana. Strong ties to the school, strong ties to some people here. He's 40 years old, so he's young, invigorated. He holds the school record for most consecutive starts for an offensive lineman with 45. So he's played. He is. That means he's played through injuries. But he is. I think that he is going to be someone that's in the top 5 of that list. He began his coaching career at Indiana as a graduate assistant back in 2007. Then he left to work for Urban Meyer at Florida, where his coaching career began to ascend before coming to Ohio State. He was Chip Kelly's offensive coordinator at UCLA. He's to me, he's probably the leader. And it's not because of the IU thing, but the IU thing, that's a very IU thing to do. But he has credentials behind him. And when you start mentioning names like Urban Meyer, Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, where he currently is, he knows. He was at Florida, at Ohio State, so he knows what a winning culture is. That's also something of uber importance. And speaking of culture, I continue to say it. If you look up culture in the dictionary, you're going to see a picture of Indiana men's soccer next to it. That is culture. That is a program that began winning in the 70s, won in the 80s, has won in the 90s, won in the 2000s, is winning in the 20 teens, and is still winning in the 2020s. That is culture. It's a culture of winning. And Indiana football doesn't have any kind of culture, to be honest with you. It's non-existent. But Justin Fry is someone who has been around those types of programs. He knows what that takes and what it's like. I like the fact that he's been under so many uberly successful coaches, in whether it's Urban Meyer, whether it's Chip Kelly, whether it's Ryan Day. So that's someone to keep a look at. Washington, Kalen DeBoer's offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb. He's also San Diego State is also looking at him maybe right now, but he's a hot name. He is a protege of Kalen DeBoer, like I said. He spent 5 seasons in the Mountain West at Fresno State, where Kalen was. before following DeBoer to Washington. And if you haven't been paying attention, Washington has the most explosive offense in college football. They have the last time I checked, the leading offense in college football. He turned down Nick Saban last year. So how about that? A lot of other names out there. I see some like DeLon McCullough. I don't know, because the fact that he came to IU for a year and left, not sure that I'm not sure how much of a look he'll get, but he has some ties to IU, obviously. Former NFL running back, spent 2 stints in Bloomington. I did not realize that. Jason Candle from Toledo. Toledo having a very, very good run. His team is 11-1, set to play Miami of Ohio in the MAC title game. He is the MAC Coach of the Year. He's won at least 9 games 3 times in his 7 seasons, but that's at Toledo. And, of course, former defensive coordinator Kane Womack, who was a good hire for South Alabama. He's only 36. He's 21-16 in his 3 seasons there at South Alabama. And he won, and they were able to go into Stillwater, Oklahoma this year and beat Oklahoma State 33-7. How that happened, I don't know. And they won 10 games last year. He has to get a look. But I'm not a fan of defensive-minded head coaches, although his South Alabama team seems to score points. But I just prefer an offensively minded head coach, personally. But right now, I mean, I think Justin Fry probably will be the, I don't know if you'd call him the top candidate, but he's definitely, no question, is he top 5. Then there's Jake Dickert from Washington State, who in Washington State, going from a dysfunctioned and dissolving Pac-12 to potentially moving into a Big Ten job would obviously be a big step up for him, because whatever's left there between Washington State, Colorado State, most likely bringing in, I think, the Mountain West into the Pac-12 is what they're probably going to end up hoping, but it will not. It's just not going to be anything close to what the Big Ten can offer and what a Big Ten school will have to offer. Indiana's going to have to pay for a good coach. They're going to have to. I think that I think that has to start in the $5 to $6 million range a year, without question. If not, then they're going to be trolling in waters where they've trolled before. But who are some? If it's someone I haven't mentioned, who is some of the coaches those of you that are on the Andy Moore Honda hotline would like to see? Why not some that I have? Now, while you're thinking of that or putting that up, let me put to bed any thoughts of John Gruden. While John Gruden has IU ties, I think someone said he went to Bloomington South for a year, but also I think his dad was on staff at one point. Go back and read his emails that were leaked by Dan Snyder in his own villainous way. But regardless of that, they were Sean Lewis from Colorado. those emails will be enough to keep him out, in my opinion. Not that he's not a good coach, but Indiana is just not going to get involved in that. I truly believe that. David thinks that John Gruden would show IU is serious about winning, but he just, that's not going to happen. David, I suggest you go back and read the emails that he wrote. So to put that to bed. Sean mentions Sean Lewis from Colorado, who is a name I have also heard, the offensive coordinator who was actually demoted by Deion Sanders, which that was a weird deal. But regardless of that, his name has popped up as a potential candidate with good reason. But everybody wants to be a head coach. And for those who haven't, a Big Ten job is a Big Ten job. It doesn't matter if it's at Indiana. It's a challenge, and today's challenges, I think, are easier. But Indiana, I mentioned earlier, they have to put in a gigantic effort, and someone just said earlier, asked, define effort. Well, an upgrade in facilities. While fans here think that they have upgraded facilities because they enclosed the ends of the stadium, who cares? They were 20 years behind in doing that. Most programs have their own weight rooms, which I don't know that really matters, but Indiana doesn't have that. Their indoor practice facility is a little old and uninspiring. They're at the bottom of the Big Ten. I'm not saying they're dead last, but they're down in the bottom when it comes to facilities. And if you think that matters, there you go. They're down toward the bottom. Philip says, Kurt Cignetti, the James Madison coach. I like that already because James Madison is a program that is just boom. It reminds me of Buffalo a couple years ago when Buffalo became, all of a sudden, they're ranked in football. They were ranked in basketball. The same with James Madison. Both their football and basketball programs have been pretty daggone good. And that's a program that I think just made the jump to Division I because James Madison is not eligible for was it their conference championship? And because of their just moving up, I believe. Well, we've got to take a break. Up next, Chronic Hoosier joins us. We're back with more here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hello, sir.
What's going on?
Oh, nothing. I'm just trying to hire a football coach.
Ain't we all?
Oh, and I failed to mention Antoine Randall L., which I know is a popular name, but I think has no chance in Hades of becoming the head coach of Indiana.
You know, there's, yeah, and I loved Juan. He was here with me. It's some of the most exciting I've ever seen. But come on. I'm not saying he couldn't be one day. I'm just saying you don't go from a position coach in the NFL, then all of a sudden we're just going to put you in charge of a college program in the Big Ten for your first head coaching gig.
Yep. Not going to happen, nor is Mike Hart, because the first chance he gets, he's back to Michigan.
Yes, we've already seen that.
Tulane coach, yeah. Justin Fry is going to end up in the top two, I think, at the very minimum.
That's an interesting one because I think how much they weight experience.
Well, yeah, and I've hated saying
we go live, so you can just carry this right on in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio on this Tuesday. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate you no matter where and how you're listening. Chronic Hoosier joins us now. And Chronic, of course, we've been talking about various things, but Indiana and their search for a football coach, which is in its infancy, but this is something that has to grow up really fast. You can't take long to do this. They have got to get through this quickly because of the transfer portal. We've already seen several players jump in. Indiana losing their, I think, 5th quarterback to the portal in the last 3 years now with Brendan Sorsby and Dexter Williams in the portal. People may be expecting to see someone like Jackson in there, but he's already transferred once. That would cause him a year to sit out. So maybe he's sitting here going, you know what? I'm going to sit here and wait for the fallout, and hopefully one of these they get a good coach in here, and it's going to give me a better shot at things.
Yeah, let me just start by saying I'm officially withdrawing my name from consideration for the position. I just want to make that clear so we can narrow the search a little bit because there are so many names swirling around out there. Many of which are completely ridiculous at this point.
Like John Gruden. So let's put
John Gruden. He showed up here for a camp one day. Somebody saw him in an IU uniform or an IU polo, and now he's a candidate. He's a wild card. You know what? If we're going that route, can we get Ditka on the list? For the love of God, can we get Mike Ditka on the list? No, it's officially silly season in Bloomington right now. I have a feeling this process, no differently than you had a pretty good hunch that this was heading in this direction, as did a number of folks that I trust. And I think if you believe that this decision was made well in advance of the bucket game, you have to believe that candidates have been identified in advance of the bucket. And likely contacted, if not through intermediaries in some fashion, just to gauge interest, to kind of figure out what your short list is. You would hope that an orderly, productive search would have already zeroed in on who they want to talk to, likely in what order, identified the strengths and the weaknesses, and are now just working to work out the logistics of doing the meet and greets and the interviews and whatnot. I saw a lot of people groaning when it was announced yesterday that they had employed a search committee to aid in this. And I think it's important to recognize even programs that are zeroed in on one guy and one guy only, or at least a very select few will often go this route simply because you have an intermediary who now has a duty to protect your interest, your confidentiality. It gives the plausible deniability. It allows a lot of things to happen that might otherwise kind of veer towards the direction of tortious interference of a business.
You mean all the things that were not done before the hiring of Archie Miller?
Yeah, I have a feeling this one is a little more guided, if not by experience, within the institution than maybe some outside learnings. But I have a feeling they are a little more savvy this go around than perhaps what they were last. Now, I've yet to see the reports of the Brinks truck being backed up at Brad Stevens' front door, but as soon as that happens, that we are doing things in the most Indiana way possible. But no, seriously, I have a feeling that they're probably, if they haven't already talked to him, they're in the process of arranging the talks and just figuring out who the guy is and what it's going to take. Because as you mentioned, timing is of the essence here. Not only do you have what's likely to be an increasing job market as the days go by here after the season ends, with more positions becoming open. As you said, you've got the portal to deal with, and you've got to figure out who you want to keep, who you can keep, and kind of get some of that sorted out. Because not the least of which is, these portal decisions often come with the price tag, and with finite resources, you've got to figure out just how much money you have on the table for your other needs. So that's going to be job number one. Well, maybe 1A, 1B certainly going to be finding a staff, because as we have seen in acute clarity here over the last several years, oftentimes a head coach is very dependent on their coordinators, on their position coaches in order to make the thing work. And those relationships often are a little bit closer, a little bit tighter perhaps than the player and the head coach. So I think it's also going to be critically important to identify whomever the new coach is, what staff he chooses, and get those guys to work, because you have to have people under contract in order to pay for things like travel and cell phones and all the things that go into the recruiting world. So I imagine we'll probably start getting news in some pretty quick order here. I don't know that this week necessarily, but my guess is by the time IU lets out on Christmas break, we've probably got a staff in place from head coach all the way down, or most of the way down, simply because of the time constraints involved here.
And I know that you're busy doing what you do for a living. So sitting here scouring all the candidates is nothing that you have time to do. But I also know that you are staying on top of things. I am of the thinking that you have to have a guy that has had coaching experience, but there are a couple of exceptions that just jump off the page. And I've also said that, please, Indiana should not do the Indiana thing that they always do. Now, Justin Fry would kind of fit into both of those categories, but he's also one of the only people that I see as a legitimate candidate that does not have head coaching experience, but because of who all he has worked under and with, he has worked with the best. He has worked at Florida with Urban Meyer. He has worked with Chip Kelly, UCLA. He's been at Ohio State under Ryan Day. He has been under the best at the best programs in college football. That probably trumps maybe not having head coaching experience. He's probably one of the very, very few I would put in that category. Maybe the offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, underneath of Caleb, under Caleb DeBoer. But other than that, it's like, man, I think it has to be a head coach, even if it's been a guy like Kane Womack, who, while he has had success at South Alabama, I'm not a fan of defensively minded head coaches, although his team does score some points. And as I'm looking at a picture of him, he still carries on that LEO tradition on his arm. But this is a job that Scott Dolson has to get right. This is because of the timing, because of going into the new Big Ten, as I keep calling it, because of the change in college athletics. Indiana can no longer afford to just patiently sit at the bottom of the football world. And I'm sure he agrees with me wholeheartedly, as we'll get Chronic back here in a second, and just let him just jump in whenever we get him. Are you back? Not quite, but I think he may have muted himself and not known it. But when he comes back, that's one of my best points I've made to date, man. And hopefully we'll have him back here in a second. But so Kane Womack is one of those guys that does have the head coaching experience, has experience at Indiana, but I'm not sure that he's the guy that has enough cachet to get it done. But he's also has a good personality. So he's someone that is going to there you go. How about that one? You with us now?
I am. I never lost the audio. I'm not sure where I went.
There we go. We're back. Well, I was like, daggone it. That was one of the best little rants I've gone on for a while, too. It wasn't really a rant, but I was saying that this is a hire that Scott Dolson has to get right. And for a number of reasons. First of all, you start with he's the guy that's on the hook for the $15 million that they paid out to Tom Allen, number one. Number two, because of the timing going into this new Big Ten, Indiana cannot afford to just patiently sit at the bottom of the Big Ten because of the changes that are coming to college athletics. And they just simply have not taken it seriously enough. Not only are they going to have to hire a new staff, they're going to have to make adjustments and improvements with the facilities at Indiana. They're going to have to do a lot to show that they're serious in today's world of college athletics, because there could come a day where Indiana is left behind. Their basketball legacy is great, but they're not doing it right now. They're not going to Final Fours. So they don't have anything going that's exceptional other than women's basketball and men's soccer. And damn it if we didn't lose him again. So I'm sure everybody else agrees with me, and we'll get him back. But it's just, and it mesmerizes you a little bit, because most other schools get it right. How can schools like Kansas get it right? You back with us, my friend?
Man, my Wi-Fi is not that great. No, well, I said it Sunday when I woke up and saw the news. You have to acknowledge this program has been lost in the college football woods for virtually the entirety of its existence. 136 years we've been playing football in Bloomington, and during that time, they have managed to amass more losses than any program in the NCAA. They lead the country. It's been bad, and in spite of all that, they find themselves today, this week, this year, next season, part of the most lucrative conference in the country, and all the resources that provides. It is a tremendous opportunity for Indiana to get it right. And as you alluded to, and as I mentioned in the tweets, I don't know how many more chances you get, because quite honestly, as the college football landscape continues to shift seismically underfoot, there is quickly becoming a class of haves and have-nots. And the haves are the ones that can fill seats, that can get TVs to turn in on Saturdays. That's it. It's what's driving all of this. And, all the traditions, all the legacies, all the historical rivalries and alignments, they don't mean squat. They just don't. It doesn't matter that you've been in this conference forever. The next time a contract's up for grabs, or a couple of commissioners or ADs float the idea of a super conference, and now they're doubling, if not tripling, numbers on balance sheets. Indiana could quickly find itself on the outside looking in. And if you can't compete with semi-regularity, that's the risk that you run. Ask the Pac-12 schools what this feels like. Oregon State, Washington State. That could be Indiana real easily. Or you could find yourself in the Big East, where it's basketball only. We're not even trying to compete in this college football world. But those are the stakes at hand right now. And I think it is imperatively critical that Indiana do its due diligence in this hiring and get this one right, because there's no guarantee that you're going to be at the table the next time that they start divvying up the spoils. And it's one of those things where we've talked for decades, like literally Galen, Clavio, Scott Caulfield. We've been discussing for better part of almost 20 years now, 15 plus, the chicken, the egg argument. How do you get Indiana football better? Do you have to have better product, or do you have to have fan support? Well, we've seen that if you put good product on the fields, the fan will support. And the inverse has been recently proven true as well. When the product stinks, the fans just stop showing up. So for all the potential that the football program holds from a revenue standpoint, both current and future, you've got to get this thing right. Because at the end of the day, when you're competing against the Ohio States, the Michigans, now the USCs, the Oregons, as well as, the Iowas for that matter, and the Nebraskas. Let's be honest, Nebraska has had a trash product for years, and they still sell out every weekend, which at least enables them to keep swinging from a financial standpoint. Indiana's got to find out some way to give the fans, to give the alumni something to show up for, something to turn on for, something to spend their money on. Because quite frankly, the risk that they're taking financially have to be justified in the end. Scott Dolson rewarded Tom Allen's meteoric rise with a record contract, which resulted in a record buyout because it obviously didn't work as anticipated. For a program like Indiana, you can't sustain too many of those hits. We're just a couple years removed from another 8-figure buyout for a coach that we didn't want to coach here anymore. Our donor class is not deep like Texas A&M. This isn't something that Hoosiers do lightly. So I give them credit for being bold and deciding that they needed a new direction, that things just weren't going to improve under the status quo. That being said, though, you've got to wonder how many more trips to the well before that thing runs dry and the checks just start drying up.
Absolutely. And not only that, like I said, with the landscape of college athletics changing, and you mentioned it, Indiana runs the risk of being left behind because the basketball legacy isn't there right now. They're not going to Final Fours. Other programs have kind of passed them up in that category, and whether it's Miami or Kansas State or any other program that's mediocre, that has been mediocre for so long, you can only live on a legacy for so long. You have to produce. And especially when your legacy is basketball, not football, you have even less. It's even more tenuous as far as being looked at as someone of prominence. And even though they're a founding member of the Big Ten could go the way of the Pac-12, like you said. It could just become something else 5 years from now, just because football is the engine that drives the train, and Michigan doesn't care about Indiana. Ohio State doesn't care about Indiana. Those teams just don't care about Indiana when it comes down to themselves. And I'm not blaming them for that. They have to look out for what they have to look out for. And if it's a new mega structure of some kind, man, you have to do everything you can to keep yourself in position of staying in that party, or otherwise you get shut out of a gigantic check that they are currently receiving each year that is going to grow with the addition of Washington and Oregon and USC and UCLA. The money rights for the Big Ten alone is going to skyrocket. It's going to go from the $50 million they've been making to over $100 million. But if you're not part of that, buddy, you don't get that. And then where do you go?
Look no different than the physical transfer. Look no further, rather, than the physical transformation across 17th Street in the last 15 years since the Big Ten launched. Everything that has been built, all the investments that have been made in all the programs on campus, all the Olympic sports, are due largely in part to the Big Ten Network and all the revenues that's provided since then. And with those numbers increasing, quite rapidly, it certainly puts Indiana in a position where they can make some of these choices, take some of these risks, and as I said, be bold. But at the end of the day, it's going to take an investment. Not just in the head coach, not just in the coordinators, but in the position group coaches, the staff, the facilities. None of those go away. None of those arms races are going to abate anytime soon. They're only going to get sharper. The fan experience, quite frankly, when you visit the Rock versus virtually any other stadium in the Big Ten, not to mention across the country, it's a markedly different experience. There is absolutely zero buzz in that stadium, both natural or artificial for that matter. So there's a ton to address, and millions and millions of dollars of reasons why it would be wise to get this one right, but also recognizing that you're running out of runway here in this modern era, and I just don't know how many more cracks they get to get it right before things change to the point where Indiana is just effectively irrelevant, in the national conversation as conferences are aligned and the royalties are divvied up here. So I think it's a great opportunity for Indiana. I just would really love to see Indiana do some things that Indiana doesn't normally do, namely of which is go all in on football. And you saw Tom allude to it in his thank you note. You've seen a lot of former players chiming in, stating exactly the same. This is a massive buyout, one of the largest in the history of college athletics. That's all well and good, but it only works if the investment in the rebuild is equal to or greater than in its financial impact of the divorce. Because quite honestly, that's an awful lot of money to break up and not get something put back together again that puts you in a better position.
The one thing that I think Indiana has going for it that it did not previously is Pam Whitten, because that means Michael McRobbie is not there. And I do not think that Michael McRobbie was a friend of athletics. I think that too much money of the Big Ten money went elsewhere outside of athletics because of that. And I don't think that that's how it works at most other schools. B, you have to reinvest in what you're doing to get that money, to earn that money, to deserve that money. And that's how I think the Big Ten or the bigger schools would look at it 5 years from now if it comes down to that.
It's an interesting component to the equation. Pam Whitten is certainly more vocal, more physically present in her support for the athletics programs than I think McRobbie was. I'm still waiting to see what her legacy is going to be here, what she's going to build. And I don't mean necessarily structures. She has now navigated some pretty large divorces for the university in the splitting up of IUPUI between the two universities that were kind of co-managing it. The verdict's still out on how that's going. Purdue's going all in on their Indianapolis investment right now, and I think IU's perhaps playing a little bit of catch up there. But as far as it relates to athletics, I don't know that she matters in the grand scheme of things. That certainly you have to have a head administrator that's on the same page with your AD. But I think this is probably Scott Dolson and Quinn Buckner's forte here. Scott's a guy that spent his entire career with the university, largely eliciting checks from other people. And he's proven to be pretty good at that in his role as AD. I know he certainly performed at a high level as an associate AD under Fred Glass with all the capital projects that they were able to manage. I know Scott ran point on most of those. But his relationships, especially within the athletic community, the IU athletic community, are probably the most important asset that they have. Now, his ability to articulate a vision for the football program and what he's trying to do with it, I think, is going to be paramount here, because no different than with the Archie firing and the Mike Woodson hiring, that was a two-sided coin, and it was a pretty large coin on both sides. One, to make the problem go away, and two, to usher in some change. And I would imagine that's going to be pretty much the bulk of Scott's efforts here for the time being, for some time forward, is getting the support together to make this work. Because without a pool, a war chest to go after the coach that you want and the salary that's going to command, the coordinators, I firmly believe you get what you pay for. And that's not to say that you can't find a deal, you can't find a bargain, you can't catch an up and comer whose worth hasn't been fully demonstrated yet. But at the end of the day, market economics are pretty straightforward as far as supply and demand. And you've got to be prepared to spend on par with those that you're competing against. And that's the same for the head coach, applies all the way down the line, right down to your, the lowest level staffers in the building. And I think it's going to take quite a bit to get Indiana caught up there. And that doesn't even scratch the surface of NIL. And that's where I think it's probably most perilous for them, because NIL is often driven by pride in the boosters, pride in the program, pride in what they can contribute to it. But usually that's tied to belief in what the program can be. And, I don't know that there's anybody that's got a steeper hill to climb than somebody trying to instill pride in Indiana football because, motion everywhere. Look at the record. Look at their history. This is not something that has garnered the emotions, the passions that you see across the nation. Look no further than, pretty much any Saturday in Bloomington in November and look across the stands and see how they turn out and support compared to, look at Ross 8 this last weekend. Phenomenal crowd and some miserable weather for two miserable teams playing for nothing but a rivalry trophy. Yeah, absolutely nothing on the line other than being able to feel good for once when they chant IU sucks. And they show up in force. And that's something Indiana's not been able to do with any consistency for some time. And I think that's just reflective of the emotion, the passion, the investment in IU football. And I'm not saying that can't be changed. We've seen it. We have seen it firsthand recently, what a decent product on the field can do as far as getting butts in the seats. But right now you're looking at another nadir in the program's history, and it's going to take a splash. I don't just mean in big name or big dollar figure, but it's going to take a seismic sea change across the board in how Indiana invests in its football program, what it emphasizes, what it prioritizes, and where it puts its money. And you have to raise the money before you can spend it. So I wish Scott Dolson all the luck, because Lord knows he's got his work cut out for him in that regard.
Do you have a top 3 list, top 5 list, just that from what you've looked at or thought of?
I don't, and I've really, more than anything, I've tried to step back and what do you need from that position? Because it's real easy, to spit out names that have recognition. Names that carry clout. It's real easy to look at up and coming guys, whether it be MAC coaches, coordinators, assistants. At the end of the day, though, I think Indiana needs, first and foremost, they need somebody that's not going to get their pants dropped in the in-game chess match that happens between the whistles, because for far too long we've seen Indiana get outplayed between the headsets, and that's just what it is. Let's be honest. There wasn't a person in the country that didn't see an onside kick coming.
Boy, don't bring it up. Jacksonville, Gator Bowl.
I mean, but everybody and their brother saw it, except for the people on the sidelines,
and won't ever forget it either.
No, and the down and distance decisions and just so many things where Indiana strategically got outplayed. You look at the, I can't remember who I saw post the luck graphic yesterday, and the unluckiest teams, and of course Indiana's in the top 25. And you look at the expected point differential due to our bad luck. Well, how much of that luck is created by boneheaded moves, by lack of discipline, by lack of organization? Those are self-inflicted wounds often. I firmly believe you create your own luck. Preparation puts you in position to capitalize. And quite frankly, Indiana just all too often didn't look prepared. And that's not to say that they didn't have plenty of games that they were within arm's reach of a victory. But the ability to somehow snatch defeat instead so consistently tells you it ain't just luck. It's not just the flip of a coin. So I think Indiana needs somebody who is tactically strong as nails when it comes to understanding football. But along those lines too, you have to understand how to manage a program. You have to manage the program. You have to be an executive. And those are both really tough pulls on either side of that one. Not everybody is Vince Lombardi. Not everybody can be Bill Belichick. Not everybody can be a high-level executive, because let's be honest, we're talking about running a multi-million-dollar enterprise here with a boatload of moving parts and a ton of, quote-unquote employees, both paid and unpaid, who all have their own desires, their own motivations. So you've got to be a great leader. You've got to be a great tactician. You've got to be, in this day and age, you better be able to work the booster lounge, because quite frankly, that's where you're getting the fuel that powers your engine by virtue of those donations. You've got to be a great recruiter. You've got to, you're going to have connections in the college or in the coaching circles to help you identify exactly who you need on your team, both players and staff. Most guys don't have a list top to bottom of every individual that they want to fill their coaching staff with. They often rely on referrals. So all of those things I think are going to be critically important. The very last on that list is winning the press conference. And that's something that I feel like Indiana has often focused on. Get all the other stuff right, and the press conferences take care of themselves. So yeah. I don't know. It's fascinating. I'm fascinated to see which direction they go with it. If they get somebody that's been proven to lead a program at this level, if they get somebody that's been proven to have wins at perhaps lower levels, but multiple stops, showing that their formula, their recipe can work no matter what kitchen they're cooking in, or if they go the coordinator route, and give somebody their first shot at it. I think the stakes are probably higher than the threshold to take a flyer on somebody at this point. And that's not to say that you can't find the right guy. I'll say it's on blue in the faith. Kevin Wilson was the best football coach Indiana's hired, perhaps in its history, when it comes down to just the nuts and bolts of coaching football and X's and O's. But there's so much more that goes into this job than just X's and O's. And history kind of speaks for itself, how that works out when you don't have that dynamic person in that role. So I'm real curious to see which way they go with it. I'm real curious to see what the budget ends up being, because like I said, you're setting record numbers here in the buyout and the divorce. Show me what the rebuild looks like, and that's the one that I'm most concerned about right now.
Absolutely. Chronic Hoosier, thank you so much. We appreciate you, man.
Hey, apologize for all the typical technical glitches here, but always a pleasure to join you, Jim.
No worries, brother. Appreciate it. Chronic Hoosier joining us. We'll be right back with Mike Niziolek from the Bloomington Herald-Times right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Whoops. Hey, Michael.
How's it going, Jim?
Good. I didn't think we were going to have you today.
Hey, Jim. I'm just going to go ahead and go live, and then I can plug in the commercial later because I have to,
Perfect.
All right.
No
problem. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hey, welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday. Mike Niziolek from the Bloomington Herald-Times joins us. And Mike, we've been talking, I'll be honest with you, more football than anything, obviously, for obvious reasons. Indiana right now in the hunt for a new coach, what that will entail. Who can that be? Does it have to be somebody with head coaching experience? Because if that's the case, then that eliminates someone like Justin Fry from Ohio State. So there's just so many questions that have to be answered, but answered fast, because Indiana doesn't have forever to do this. This is something that has to happen quickly, but it has to be right.
I think that's every coaching search, right? I mean, that's what you want, ideally, right? But no, I think to the urgency. I mean, I think you've seen it over the last 48 hours, right? You're losing 17 players. I had it by my scholarship projections, the chart I have, that they have 48 counters if if none of the seniors come back. The portal opens, the window opens on December 4th. And, to every coach says tampering goes on. So, I mean, your best tier players, like your Donovan McCulley's, Trent Holland, Philip Dunham, Carter Smith, are guys that are going to probably be get sort of unofficial sort of, offers and see what's out there before even that happens. So you got to have somebody in place at least, maybe even a staff member or two, ideally, before that window opens, so you can try to say, here's what we got, to try to kind of recruit those top tier guys back. Otherwise, your cupboard's bare and you're kind of really starting from square one.
And we've seen lists. I've talked about it today. One of the things that the biggest question I have to ask is, does this head coach or does this new head coach have to be one that has previous head coaching experience? Because that is of uber of importance in this day and age. But if that answer is yes, then that eliminates a couple of guys that are kind of high on the list. But one of those, of course, is currently over at Ohio State, former Indiana player. And now I've just drawn a blank on his name all of a sudden.
Justin Fry.
Yeah, Justin Fry, the former player in Indiana. He's from Indiana, but he's been at Florida, at Ohio State, under Urban Meyer, under all these great coaches, under Ryan Day at Ohio State. So he has a ton of experience. So I don't know if not having been a head coach will eliminate that or not, but that's going to be a question that Scott Dolson has to answer.
Yeah, and I think when you're having your first national search in 13 years and only second time in almost 2 decades, I think you cast a wide net in terms of not necessary. I mean, I think you have preferences, and I think head coaching experience is one of the preference. To be honest, but I think you try to. I don't know. Maybe somebody surprises you, right? I think you talk to people. I think you do an initial kind of round of interviews and see. Maybe you go down a path you weren't expecting if somebody said, kind of impresses you. But I think the preference is just from what I've heard, and based on kind of that head coaching is a box that they'd like to have checked.
And everybody would, just for obvious reasons. But then if that's the case, and Justin comes up because of, the IU ties. And that's the one thing I'm like, Indiana cannot do the Indiana thing here, which they have always done, which is, let's get us an Indiana guy. But in football, it hasn't been that way so much. But this is without question the most important hire Scott Dolson will have made in his tenure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just because of the numbers now with the buyout, I think when you have something like that, I mean, $15 million is, I think it's tied for 4th highest ever. There's going to be added pressure to get it right. You have. He negotiated part of that as the contract extension, so it's gonna, he's gonna feel some pressure. You don't really. Most ADs don't get 2 football hires. It's just as simple as that. If you screw up one, you generally don't get a second. I mean, here it might be a little different, just because basketball obviously drives the ship, and so if Mike Woodson continues to work out, that buys you some goodwill with the fan base, but. You're not giving another coach $15 million not to coach here again. That's for sure.
Well, and you speak of that, of Mike Woodson, he has to make the tournament this year. If not, then that kind of folds right into what you're saying. And right now we look at this team as I don't know, maybe not as far as making the tournament. Basketball wise.
Yeah, no, they're certainly on the bubble. But I mean, they've done what they've needed to do so far. Haven't looked pretty doing it, but I mean, that's going to add to it, right? I mean, now so you gotta. It's a tough time. I mean, you hope the basketball team, as a young group, kind of pulls together in January and February, and then that takes a little of the pressure off. But yeah, right now, I mean, you got no football coach, you got 17 players jumping in the portal, and you got a basketball team that hasn't played very good. So, not a fun, Thanksgiving holiday, I guess.
So if you had a guess, just looking at the list, who are some of the favorites or the most likely candidates that you've seen?
Well, I think, the boxes that I think would help a candidate, like we said, head coaching experience. I think a guy with, not Indiana ties necessarily, but Midwest ties, Big Ten ties. I think those names are going to get, guys, those are guys you might want to watch, just based on some of the things I've heard about, who Scott's kind of leaning on for advice and what kind of the names that I've heard that, he likes. But, for me, I look at it, one of the names that I've liked that I don't know that fits these boxes is I thought, you give Ryan Grubb a call, right? Kalen DeBoer's offensive coordinator. I thought somebody like he makes a lot of sense. Just for me, but I think that kind of goes opposite of what I've heard they're looking for. But I think an Indiana as a job, getting somebody exciting like that, a kind of up and comer that offensively minded, I think would be a nice box here to check just after kind of the defense. You usually go with the opposite. Most ADs do, but that's the name I like. But that's not. I think that kind of goes against what some of the things I've heard just about what they're prioritizing in the search.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. As a matter of fact, I love that name. The only thing he doesn't have is the head coaching experience, but I love who he has been under because I know how good that Kalen DeBoer was at Indiana. He was able to jump right in at when he left Indiana to go back out to Fresno State and handle them, and then boom, move right up. After he was only there for 1 year, right?
Fresno State, they were there for a couple of years, I thought.
Was he there for a couple of years before he went to Washington? But there's no doubt that his longtime experience as a coach, and I like Ryan Grubb is one of my favorites. And another thing is he doesn't have Indiana ties. His guy does in
DeBoer.
Kalen DeBoer, but he doesn't, so it just doesn't have to be that way, man.
Well, he did coach at Eastern Michigan, and he is from Iowa, so I mean, familiar with the Big Ten footprint, and I think that's enough. When I say I think it's more sort of that it would be enough for a guy. So, but yeah, so he does have a little bit of Midwest in there, Midwest flavor.
And we could carry this discussion on and on. Unfortunately, for on air, we have to end it, but we can continue this after the broadcast. But right now, that's going to wrap it up for today. I cannot thank Mike DeCourcy enough, Chronic Hoosier. Mike Niziolek with us right now. No John today, of course. That means RC filling in, keeping us between the white lines. Big thanks to all of you for being with us as well. We're back tomorrow for more of the same because there's plenty to discuss. Enjoy your day. Until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.